Welcome to ICICIdirect. Today we are in an exclusive conversation with Somasundaram, PR, Managing Director of the World Gold Council. India, remember, is the second largest consumer of gold in the world, meets most of its annual requirement through imports. And of course, it has its sheen given the emotion it stirs across all Indian families. That makes it extremely important as you go into this budget on the 1st of Feb. So in India, the gold market specifically has high custom duty, which really distorts the market as the current differential between the Indian gold prices and international gold prices widened to almost 15.5% in total. There has been a long-going industry demand to reduce import duty to dissuade illicit trade and reduce distortion between domestic and the international market. That I know is also one of the biggest asks of the industry. What are your thoughts, So?
Yes, clearly that is one of the perennial requests that the industry makes. Last year, of course, the duty was cut by 5%, but then there was this agri-infra cess which was put it, so that made it 2.5% cut, which is good. Having said that, yes, even internationally, if you compare, the total duty on gold comes to something like 14.1%, okay, including GST. I'm just saying one on top of the other. Now, that is clearly high and that promotes great trading. It's a big issue. Obviously, great trading has been low because of the COVID and international travel being affected. But clearly, there is always a potential for that to grow because there's a 14% gap between the official and the unofficial market. So there's always a request, why don't we cut duty? But clearly, internationally, bullion is generally at zero duty. Most of the advanced accounts is equivalent to a currency. But then the VAT on jewelry makes up for it. It could be 17, 18%. In India, the VAT, which is GST, is very small, but the duty is high. So it's a question that even the structure also may be looked at some stage.
But so does that mean that while we may get a duty cut, it potentially could get compensated by a hike in GST rate because that now stands at 3%, nullifying any sort of positive impact to the end consumer, right?
Yes, that is the issue. You see, there is a difference between bullion, which is an equivalent of a currency, and jewelry, which is considered, an item which people cannot use as luxury as well. So that is always a very, very difficult, see, with 800 tons consumption, okay, it's always a difficult choice. But yes, there is always a discussion whether we should cut duty and increase GST, or should the overall cut be less than 5%. Industry's demand is always like, overall, it should not exceed 5, 6, 7% max.
Right. So additionally, the industry has also been calling for rationalizing the capital gains rate to boost investment in gold. Right now, the long-term capital gains from the sale of gold is taxed at 20% compared to 10%, which is a flat tax on long-term capital gains from the equity markets. Anything that the government can do in this budget, or maybe potentially even outside this budget, to incentivize promoting recycling of gold?
Yes, I think that's a very, very good point you made. Essentially, India is dependent on imports. And if you have to cut down imports, there is a gold monetization scheme where you deposit the gold in the bank, but there is also a possibility that you sell the gold. I mean, you start recycling the gold. Now, recycling can increase only when there is a tax advantage, an incentive. And particularly when people's mindset are towards hoarding gold, keeping a lot of gold, it is important to incentivize them. So there has been a request that with the various reforms that are happening, could we give a period when if you recycle gold, it is exempt from capital gains? Yeah, it will be a very good idea, but I am not very sure that it will find favor given all the discussions around capital gains itself. To pick out one asset class and say that would be, exempt may be a little challenging, even from a policy point of view. But yes, if you speak from the industry's point of view, a capital gain exemption will lead to higher recycling.
Right. So I know we talk about this year on year. We talk about what the industry wants, and this is not just specific to the gold vertical or the gold as a commodity, but across India Inc. as well. Is the fact that announcements are made, but timely execution is what is really missing, right? How important do you think is timely execution on previous announcements at this point of time?
Well, as I said, gold reforms have been, several reforms have been announced since 2015. Some have found their way to the execution, the implementation. Some are still in the realm of discussions, clearly. And for instance, the International Bullion Exchange, domestic spot exchange on bullion, they were announced and there's been enormous traction. We almost have a framework, not almost, we have a framework for regulations for domestic and for international bullion exchange. Fantastic progress. Gold monetization scheme, things were rolled out fast. But there was this other issue that gold will be a financial asset. Now there we haven't had much discussions or much progress on that. Clearly, you're right. It is important that some of these announcements and holistically are also executed in time.
So you touched upon the bullion exchange, and of course, if that needs to be a reality and has to work, then we'd have to look at allowing export of gold bars also at international margins, right? Do you really have a view on this? Is this significant enough in terms of being picked up in this budget?
Absolutely. Whether it's a budget item or it is a policy item, I would probably not do that. Everything need not come to the budget because many things can happen outside. But again, it's a very, very important milestone if we have to see the gold market is reforming. Clearly, we need to allow the export of bars at international margins. And with international bullion exchange now coming through, definitely there is also an expectation at some stage that we may allow export through the international bullion exchange, because then all the other risky practices of sending it to a person of your choice, which could have, which could lead to other kind of practices, will not happen with international bullion exchange. So it is a very, very good thing, because then India at some stage, recycling can grow. You can export when the market is at a discount, and India can actually become maybe an exporter of bullion.
Right. Well, I guess that it would be a dream come true. But let's talk about financialization of gold. And this again has been a talking point for quite some time now, where the government has tried often enough in the past to encourage gold as a saving as opposed to just jewelry consumption, right? And this, of course, has more significance even now as the CAD stands at an 8-year high in terms of the current account deficit. What are your thoughts on financialization of gold? What needs to be done? What needs to be executed so this becomes a reality sooner than later?
Again, a very interesting point. If you see, one of the 3 announcements made in the past by the previous finance minister was that there will be gold will be a financial asset class.
Right, right.
And clearly some reforms have happened, but one of the things of making financial asset classes, what we call as, banks must be allowed not only to open gold deposit accounts, they must be allowed to buy back gold. Why should we always go only to a jeweler to sell? So in loosely what I would say, bullion banking, that has to be allowed, permitted. Banks must be allowed to deal in gold, just the way they deal with other foreign currency assets. So this has been a very important thing. And the primary thing is gold savings account for that. That is, you walk into a bank, instead of bringing your old gold, you can always give 1,100,000 rupees and say 20 grams of gold. Right. Open my account, and I will take it 3 years later with this. Now the bank will be able to put that gold to use, just the way they put our money to use. So this is again something which is a high expectation. Again, I'm not sure it is a budget item. It is more now with the regulators. But yes, when strong signals come through the budget, we may see this happening as a reality sometime soon.
So very lastly, digital gold has been gaining traction amongst millennials, especially as an investment option. I mean, of course, they seem to be enchanted with exploring new risk-free, storage-proof digital investment option. And of course, the pandemic has only accelerated that. Any sort of regulatory framework that needs to be put together to encourage digital gold?
Yes, it will be. It is something which is a subject that's being discussed with the digital players and with, of course, SEBI did come out with some restrictions in the recent times, asking licensed players not to deal with digital gold, but it is unorganized. So some conversations are happening. Absolutely, it is important because it is growing. It has a way of making financial inclusion much easier. People could buy gold even for 1 rupee using digital, and it is safe. At the same time, we don't want fly-by-night operators walking in, looking at this. So it is important, considering all this, that digital gold is brought under a regulatory framework. And it is something which, again, as I said, one of the things as part of the bullion banking, we could see this, coming through.
Right. I think, Soma, I've covered most aspects of what could be a wish list for the gold sector. Anything else that you want to add that we've not touched upon?
Well, I think you have covered almost all, I would say. As I said, in terms of reforms now, given that we have an exchange and we don't mind any gold, we're going to be relying heavily on refined gold and recycled gold. Okay. Right. So clearly, as a policy, we need to look at how we can incentivize recycling, whether it be capital gain exemption, whether it be GST input credit. We got to obviously think through. It's not easy, but if you look at the next big milestone in terms of reforms, I would think that promoting recycling market will be a big thing that I would expect in the next few years.
Right. Thank you very much, Som, for talking to us today at ICICIdirect. That was Somasundaram, PR, Managing Director of the World Gold Council, setting out his expectations for reforms as we run up to the budget 2022. Thank you, Som.
Thank you.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all related documents carefully before investing.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to never miss an update from ICICI Direct.